So, as we get started, how many of you remember these guys? If you said the big three, then you're right. These are the individuals that looked after the Treaty of Versailles. We have Prime Minister David Lloyd George of Great Britain. We have Prime Minister George Clemenceau from France. And of course, we have President Woodrow Wilson of the United States. Hey, who's that guy? Hey everyone, this is Mr. Trio, and today we are looking at why had international peace collapsed by 1939, winners and losers. This particular chapter is divided into 6 focus points, and this video is going to look at the first 2, the long-term consequences of the peace treaties and the consequences of the failures of the League of Nations. Now, one of the things that I'll point out right away is that many of the topics and discussions which make up these 2 focus points are review mainly of Chapter 1 and 2, the Treaty of Versailles and then the League of Nations. So in many ways, this is going to be a shorter video because we're just kind of reviewing things as we go through. Now, when we look at the long-term consequences of the Treaty of Versailles and how the treaty shaped the post-war era, we have to talk about the winners and losers of World War I. Were the winners better off or were the losers better off? We will also talk about 3 topics, which include Hitler's foreign policy, changing public opinion in Britain, and inconsistencies in the policies of the Treaty of Versailles. When we look at dissatisfied powers, we're looking at people who were on the side of the winners in World War I, and that included the Prime Minister of Italy, and he's that mystery man that I showed you in the first photo. Even though Italy was on the winning side in World War I with Great Britain, the United States, and France, Italy really did not get everything that it wanted as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. In fact, they wanted more. Specifically, they wanted a lot of territories that gave them more ports in the Adriatic Sea, and they wanted some of the colonies that had belonged to Germany and Turkey. In many ways, Italy became dissatisfied because they weren't being treated as one of the big 3. They didn't get what they wanted, even though they were on the winning side. Who else was on the winning side? Japan. And Japan was very upset because in many ways they had felt that they had been slighted at the Treaty of Versailles because they were not treated as equal. And they actually believed that this was racially motivated, which it may have been. But the fact of the matter is that they will hold a grudge against the League of Nations during the entire time in which they are a member. The other thing which is important to remember about Japan is that because they were on the winning side, they had hoped to get more of the territories in China that had been trading posts for the Germans. Since Germany had been on the losing side, they thought, well, we deserve to have those. After all, we're China's neighbor. As a bit of a spoiler alert, one of the things that I like to point out is that these 2 countries, even though they're on the winning side with the US, Great Britain, and France, they're going to cause some problems in the next few years. Now, of course, Germany was on the losing side in the World War, and Hitler's foreign policy, as he came to power, can be directly pegged to what the conditions of the Treaty of Versailles said. For example, the Treaty of Versailles said that Germany had to disarm. It could not join with Austria to create an empire. It had territories taken away, and it had to pay reparations. Hitler's foreign policy was based on the fact that the treaty was so unpopular, and he was able to convince people that Germany had been stabbed in the back during this process. So everything that he was doing in order to fight against the old treaty were very popular among German people. He was able to essentially start rearmament and violate the treaty. He joined with Austria to create one large nation. He tried to get territories back that had been taken away. And at a certain point, Hitler said, we're not paying any more reparations. So if you were to look at Hitler's playbook for his foreign policy in the 1930s, all you have to do is look at the Treaty of Versailles and then turn it around to the opposite, and that's what he wanted to do. One of the other things which is very interesting is how people perceived the Treaty of Versailles at the time. You might remember this old graph that we looked at in the first chapter. France did not think that the treaty was very harsh at all. Britain probably thought it was just right, and the United States thought it was too harsh. One of the things that happens in the 20s and the 30s is that many people in Britain begin to see that the treaty was perhaps a little too harsh, and they start moving towards where the United States' position was. And what this caused was an imbalance with how Germany would be treated. Another spoiler alert, by the way, one of the things that will happen as a result of this understanding of Germany's position is that Germany will take advantage of this public opinion to its own advantage. Now, one of the other things which is very interesting to look at with the Treaty of Versailles is that Wilson had these grand ideas of what the New World Order in Europe should look like in the years after the war. And Wilson's 14 points talked about many things such as having free trade, self-determination, meaning governments rule themselves, not someone else. And then this whole idea that people who are of a certain nationality should be ruled by people of their own nationality. These are grand ideas that Wilson came up with. But when we look at the Treaty of Versailles, we can see inconsistencies, such as Germany's area of Prussia is divided into two parts, and Poland is given access to the sea in order for them to have better trade, opposed to Germany having that area for trade. That didn't seem to make sense, did it? And places like Danzig, which should have been ruled by German people because they were German people, were now placed under the League of Nations. That seemed like an inconsistency as well. And then finally, there were millions of people that were living in the area of the new created state of Czechoslovakia. Well, once again, this doesn't make sense. Why were German people being controlled by another group of people as a result of the Treaty of Versailles? These inconsistencies will help to create cracks in the treaty's authority and also help to embolden people like Hitler and the German people to take advantage of them in order to reverse these policies. Now, as we look at the consequences of the League of Nations, what I will do is put a little link here that you can go to in which the topics of Manchuria, the World Disarmament Conference, and Abyssinia can be looked at more closely. Once again, just click that link if you want to look at the events specifically. The things that I want to bring out in the cases of Manchuria and Abyssinia is that Japan and Italy acted very poorly, and there was pretty much condemnation of what they were doing by invading these nations. However, what the League did in order to respond was essentially nothing. So let's look at an example that might be common in a school. Let's imagine that Miss King here is chewing gum, and the teacher decides to punish her. Now, the teacher has some different options. The teacher could give a warning, the teacher could give a bad point, or the teacher could give detention. If they only give a warning, how likely is Miss King to chew gum again? If it's just a warning, more than likely she would be emboldened to actually push it even further and perhaps do something else. In the same way of the cases of Manchuria and Abyssinia, because the countries were only slightly being punished with shame tactics and things of that nature, other nations like Germany and others will take advantage of the League by also taking what they want. So that's our chapter 3, first 2 focus points. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Let's talk more in class. Thank you for watching.